The chandeliers of the historic Parisian hall gleamed with gold, casting their light over silk-draped tables and rows of crystal glasses. The scent of roses filled the air, blending with the faint notes of a violin quartet. Aarav adjusted the cuffs of his tailored suit as the priest recited the vows, his gaze locked on Meera. She looked radiant, her crimson bridal lehenga embroidered with gold threads shimmering under the soft glow. Guests whispered of the beauty of the union, an Indian ceremony unfolding in the heart of Paris. To many it was a fairy tale, but close up, Meera's smile trembled. Her lips curved perfectly, yet her eyes carried something shadowed, a flicker that disappeared each time. Aarav brushed her hand. When he leaned close and whispered, "From today nothing can touch us," her lashes lowered and her fingers tightened briefly around his. She whispered back, "Yes, nothing." The champagne flowed as the evening turned to celebration. Friends toasted the couple, laughter echoing against the marble walls. Aarav's business partners congratulated him, speaking of the perfect bride, the perfect life ahead. Cameras flashed as Meera leaned against him for photographs, her face angled into a practiced smile. Yet in the corners of the hall, when no one watched, her gaze seemed to drift to the tall windows, as if something outside called to her. Later, as the guests departed and the last notes of music faded, the newlyweds retreated to their suite at the Hotel du Louvre. The grand room was perfumed with lilies and lit with soft candles. Aarav carried Meera over the threshold, laughing, his voice buoyant with joy. He set her down gently, pressing a kiss to her forehead. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. He poured them wine and raised his glass. "To us," he said. She hesitated, then clinked her glass against his. "To us." The hours ticked into night. Outside, Paris glowed beneath a drizzle, streets shimmering with reflections of passing cars. Inside, silence stretched between them. Meera sat by the window in her bridal attire, veil slipping from her hair, her gaze fixed on the city. Aarav watched her, puzzled. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. She turned, forcing a gentle laugh. "Just tired. It's been a long day." He accepted her answer, though unease prickled at him. He took her hand again, tracing the henna on her skin. For a moment warmth passed between them, a fragile closeness. Then she pulled away, saying she needed rest. Sometime after midnight, Aarav stirred from sleep, the room cloaked in silence. The faint glow of the city seeped through the curtains. He reached for Meera's side of the bed, but his hand brushed cold sheets. His eyes snapped open. She was slumped near the vanity, her veil pooled on the floor, her body motionless. "Meera!" His voice cracked as he stumbled toward her. He shook her gently, then harder. No response. Her face was pale, lips parted slightly, eyes closed as if drifting into a sleep too deep. Aarav's hands trembled as he pressed them against her neck, searching desperately for a pulse. Nothing. The wine glass lay shattered on the carpet nearby, crimson liquid staining the ivory rug. Aarav's breath hitched, his chest tight with panic. "No, no, no, please." He fumbled for the phone, his fingers shaking as he dialed. "Help! My wife, she's not breathing." "Hotel du Louvre. Suite, please come quickly." The seconds dragged like hours. He knelt beside her, clutching her hand, whispering, "Stay with me, please, stay with me." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder until blue lights flashed against the curtains. Doors slammed, footsteps rushed through the hall. The suite door burst open, uniformed officers spilling inside, medics closed behind. Aarav stumbled back as they knelt beside Meera, checking her vitals, speaking in low, urgent tones. One medic's eyes met Aarav's, grim and unyielding. "She's gone." Aarav staggered, his world shattering in that instant. The laughter of the wedding, the glow of chandeliers, the vows of forever gone in the span of a night. He dropped to his knees, clutching his face as sobs tore through him. The police began their work swiftly. Photographs of the body, questions hurled in clipped French accents, every detail of the room scrutinized. Aarav sat frozen, staring at Meera's lifeless form, draped against the vanity. His mind repeated a single thought: "I just married her." Outside, The drizzle turned to heavy rain, the streets of Paris glistening beneath the storm. Inside the suite, tragedy had written its first line, and in the silence that followed, a darker question began to rise. Who was Meera, truly, and why had death followed her into this new life? Rain lashed against the windows of the Hotel du Louvre as investigators sealed off the suite. Flashbulbs from police cameras burst through the room, capturing every angle: wine stains, broken glass, and Meera's still figure. Aarav sat hunched in a chair, his face buried in trembling hands. He had married her only hours ago. Now he was being asked, "How well did you know your wife?" His throat tightened. "She was my everything. We just started our life." But even as he spoke, a sharp pang hit him. He truly knew so little. Detective Lemaire, a stern woman with dark hair tied tightly back, paced the room. "You say she was from Delhi. What about family? Friends? Enemies?" Aarav stammered, struggling to answer. He had met Meera just a year ago, through an introduction at a cultural gala. Their courtship was fast, intoxicating. She had told him only fragments: studies in Delhi, a job in fashion. Beyond that, her past was wrapped in silence. By dawn, the suite looked less like a wedding night, and more like a crime scene. Officers carried evidence bags, murmuring to one another. Aarav's eyes followed as they lifted the suitcase she had kept locked since arriving. He had never dared to ask what was inside. The funeral arrangements were suspended. The autopsy would come first, and in the days that followed, whispers grew among the guests who had flown in for the wedding. One bridesmaid told detectives, "Meera always seemed elsewhere, like she was waiting for someone to appear." Another admitted she had seen a man outside the church, tall and brooding, who vanished as quickly as he appeared. Meanwhile, Aarav scoured through the fragments she left behind. Her phone held 2 SIM cards, hidden beneath makeup in her purse. A second phone emerged, its screen locked with a code no one knew. He stared at it, baffled, wondering what kind of secrets she had carried into their marriage. Detective Lemaire visited him again. "Monsieur, you said she was happy. But what if she wasn't who you believed she was?" Aarav's chest tightened at her words. He wanted to defend Meera, but the unease he had felt on their wedding night returned, heavier. Late one evening, alone in the hotel room, stripped of celebration, he sat with her bridal veil folded in his lap. He remembered the way her gaze had wandered during the ceremony, how she had seemed to listen to music no one else could hear. He whispered to the empty room, "Who were you, Meera? What were you hiding?" The detectives widened their search, contacting her family in Delhi. The responses came fractured, hesitant. Relatives spoke in half-truths, voices hushed as if still afraid of something unnamed. Her parents refused to travel to Paris, sending only a message of sorrow. But one line stood out, chilling Aarav to the bone. "She left India to escape. Please do not ask us from what." The investigation was no longer about how Meera died. It was about who she had been, and as Aarav stared at the locked suitcase now in police custody, a darker suspicion grew. The woman he loved, the woman he thought he married, might have been a stranger all along. The flight from Paris to Delhi was long, heavy with questions. Detective Lemaire had insisted Aarav accompany her team, convinced that the answers to Meera's death lay not in Paris, but in the country she had fled. As the plane descended over the sprawl of the Indian capital, Aarav stared out the window, his reflection pale against the glass. He had come not as a husband, but as a man chasing a ghost. Delhi was heat and noise, a city alive with contradictions, wedding processions in the streets, temples lit with devotion, alleys whispering with secrets. The detectives walked into it like strangers in a maze. Aarav followed, heart racing with every step closer to Meera's past. The first stop was the modest neighborhood where Meera's parents lived. The family's home stood quiet, curtains drawn, a faint odor of incense escaping into the street. Her father, a thin man with lines etched deep into his face, answered the door reluctantly. His voice was polite, but brittle. "Why have you come? She is gone now. Let her rest." Detective Lemaire's tone was firm. "Monsieur, your daughter's death is under investigation. We need to know about her life here, about what she was running from." For a long silence, her father stared at the ground. Then, with a shudder, he said, "She was always restless, always looking beyond these walls, but her fall came when she crossed paths with power she should have avoided." Aarav leaned forward. "What do you mean?" The man's eyes flickered to the doorway, where Meera's mother stood clutching her sari. She spoke in a low, trembling voice. A son of a politician. He noticed her at a fashion event. He pursued her, like a hunter chasing prey. When she refused him, trouble followed. Threats, shadows outside the house. We begged her to leave the city. The detectives exchanged a glance. "His name?" Her father shook his head. "Even speaking it here is dangerous. He was not the kind of man you anger without consequence." The silence that followed was suffocating. Aarav felt as though he had stepped into a nightmare, his love for Meera clashing with this vision of her life. A young woman cornered by someone powerful enough to erase truth itself. Later, a cousin agreed to speak, away from the family home. They met in a cafe, buzzing with conversation, the cousin's voice dropping low as she leaned in. Meera was clever, but she trusted the wrong people. She thought she could outsmart him. She told me once she had evidence, messages, photos, proof of what he tried to do. She said if she kept it hidden, she'd be safe. Where is this proof now? Lemaire pressed. The cousin shrugged. She never told me, but she carried secrets like treasures. Always close, always hidden. Aarav's thoughts flew to the locked suitcase in Paris, the second phone still sealed by a code. Could that be where the truth waited? Outside, the city roared with traffic, but in Aarav's chest, there was only silence. He remembered Meera's distant stares, the way she never spoke of her family with warmth, the locked parts of her life she kept away from him. He whispered under his breath, "You weren't just afraid, you were hunted." As the detectives prepared to leave Delhi, Lemaire summed it up quietly. "We are not looking at a random act in Paris. This death was written long before the wedding." But the shadows trailing Meera's past were not finished. As the plane back to France took off, unseen eyes followed, and whispers spread in Delhi's alleys. A man from her past had noticed the headlines, and he was already moving. The Paris police reviewed the wedding footage frame by frame, their eyes scanning the joyful faces frozen in digital memory, laughter, clinking glasses, the glow of chandeliers, until something shifted. In the corner of one frame, blurred but unmistakable, stood a man apart from the crowd. No tuxedo, no smile, no invitation. Just dark eyes fixed on Meera. Detective Lemaire paused the video. "Who is this?" Aarav leaned closer, his stomach tightening. He had never seen the man at the wedding, but the gaze unsettled him. It wasn't admiration, it was possession. The next day, surveillance footage from the hotel surfaced. Rain fell in streaks across the lens, yet through the distortion the same figure appeared. He lingered by the entrance just after midnight, his shoulders hunched, his eyes darting upward toward the suite where Aarav and Meera had spent their wedding night. Minutes later, he vanished into the streets. When the detectives finally put a name to the face, it struck like a knife. Raghav Sharma, a former lover from Delhi. His record was stained with violence, assault charges, financial scams, even blackmail. His last known address was a shabby apartment in Montreal, on the edge of Paris. The team moved swiftly. When they knocked on his door, Raghav opened it as if expecting them. His expression was calm, almost smug, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "You've come about Meera," he said in a voice flat and heavy. Inside, the apartment reeked of stale smoke. Empty bottles littered the table, and on the wall hung a faded photograph of Meera, smiling, younger, her eyes alight. Aarav froze at the sight. He had never seen that smile directed at him. "Tell us your connection to the bride," Lemaire demanded. Raghav leaned back, his mouth curling into a bitter grin. "Connection? She was my life once, until she ruined it." "You think you knew her?" He looked directly at Aarav, his words sharp as glass. "You married a lie." Aarav's fists clenched. "Don't speak about her that way." Raghav only laughed, low and mocking. She played all of us. You're not the first man she charmed, and you wouldn't have been the last. The detectives pressed harder. Where was he on the night of the murder? Raghav admitted he had been near the hotel. He claimed he wanted to see Meera, to confront her after years of silence. But I didn't touch her, he insisted. I only watched. She was already trapped in her own web. I just wanted her to see me so she'd know the past doesn't die so easily. The officers noted every word, every flicker of emotion across his face. But the alibi was weak, and his presence too close to ignore. When they left his apartment, Aarav walked in silence, his mind a storm. Images of his bride twisted against this revelation. Could it be true? Could Meera have lived a double life, one he never glimpsed? Detective Lemaire broke the silence. If he's lying, we'll know soon. But his story points something darker. She wasn't just a victim, Aarav. She was keeping secrets from everyone. As the car pulled away from Montreal, Raghav's words echoed inside Aarav's head. You married a lie. And for the first time since the wedding night, Aarav wondered if he had been mourning a woman he never truly knew at all. The interrogation room was stark, its walls pale and bare, the hum of the overhead light sharp in the silence. Raghav sat across from Detective Lemaire, his wrists cuffed loosely, a smirk tugging at his lips. Aarav watched from behind the glass, every muscle in his body taut, his heart thundering with dread. Lemaire began calmly. You say Meera ruined you. Tell us how. Raghav leaned forward, his voice steady, almost rehearsed. She was not the woman you think. Meera was a survivor. She knew how to make men believe in her, fall for her, give her everything. Money, protection, even their dignity. She took it all, then vanished when she was done. Aarav's chest tightened, rage pressing against grief. He shook his head, whispering, No, that's not her. Raghav's eyes glinted through the glass. You think she married you out of love? She was always calculating, always chasing the bigger prize. He chuckled bitterly. When I first met her in Delhi, she told me she wanted to own the world. She used me, charmed me. And when I had nothing left to give, she left me in pieces. I wasn't the first. And neither were you. Lemaire's pen scratched across her notepad. You claim she manipulated men. Do you have proof? Raghav shrugged. Proof? Look at my life. Look at the trail she left behind, jobs she never held, debts she escaped, doors she walked through without ever paying. She didn't just survive, she thrived on the destruction of others. She was dangerous because she knew how to make you believe she was innocent. The detectives exchanged a glance. Aarav felt the room tilt. He replayed every moment with Meera, the sudden affection, the secrets, the suitcase, the locked phone. Doubt gnawed at him, bitter and relentless. Lemaire pressed harder. And on the night of her death, Raghav's smirk faltered. He leaned back, voice lowering. I went to see her. I wanted answers, maybe even revenge. But when I stood outside that hotel, I realized she didn't even fear me anymore. She had moved on to bigger prey. I left before I did something I couldn't undo. His words carried conviction, but his eyes flickered with something darker. Regret, obsession, or guilt. As the interrogation ended, Raghav was led away, his laughter echoing faintly down the corridor. Aarav pressed his palms against the cold glass, whispering, You're lying, you're twisting her memory. Detective Lemaire stepped beside him. Maybe. Well, maybe he's telling a truth you don't want to hear. Meera lived a life we don't fully understand, and the pieces don't add up. Not yet. That night, Aarav sat alone in the empty hotel room, the scent of Meera's perfume still lingering in the air. He held her photograph in trembling hands, torn between grief and suspicion. His wife had been painted as both angel and deceiver, victim and manipulator. The truth was slipping further away, but one certainty remained. Whoever Meera had been, her death was no accident, and the past she carried had followed her all the way to Paris. The autopsy report landed on Detective Lemaire's desk, like a stone dropped into still water. Toxicology confirmed alcohol in Meera's system, but not enough to kill her. Instead, traces of sedatives surfaced, potent, fast-acting. She hadn't simply collapsed. Someone had drugged her. In the sterile confines of the morgue, Aarav stood over her lifeless body, his hands shaking. The pathologist's words were clinical, detached. The bruising near her wrist suggests restraint. She struggled before the sedative took full effect. Aarav's chest constricted. He remembered her delicate hands in his, the henna fading, now marked with evidence of violence. Lemaire's team re-examined the hotel suite. Beneath the vanity, in a crack of the floorboard, they discovered a small flash drive wrapped in silk. Encrypted files filled its memory, photos, documents, correspondence, evidence linking Meera to the son of a Delhi politician, blackmail, threats, whispered promises. Proof that her family's warnings had not been paranoia. Proof that her life had always been in danger. When Aarav was shown the files, his knees nearly buckled. Images of Meera with powerful men, messages dripping with menace. "You cannot run forever." He looked at the detectives, his voice breaking. "Why didn't she tell me? Why carry this into our marriage?" The evidence blurred the line between victim and survivor. Had Meera planned to use these files against her tormentor? Or had she hidden them as a final safeguard, trusting no one? Then came another blow. Forensic analysis revealed Aarav's fingerprints on the shattered wine glass, on Meera's wrist, even faintly on the bottle that held the sedative traces. The police questioned him again, this time not as a grieving husband, but as a suspect. "I never drugged her," Aarav shouted, his voice cracking in the interrogation room. "Yes, I argued with her that night. I found the second phone, the messages. I demanded answers. She cried. She begged me to let her explain. But I swear, I never touched her like that." The room thickened with silence. Lemaire's gaze was unflinching. Arguments turn, love becomes rage, and rage leaves marks. Aarav buried his face in his hands. He replayed that night, over and over. Meera standing by the window, her eyes distant, his voice rising, her words stumbling. He had gripped her wrist, yes, but only to stop her from walking away. Could that be what left the bruise? The thought hollowed him out. When the detectives left him alone, Aarav stared at the table before him. "Meera," he whispered, "what were you hiding from me? And what did it cost us?" Outside, the storm over Paris raged again, the scene swollen with rain. Inside the investigation room, lines blurred further between guilt and grief, truth and lies. The past had reached into their wedding night with blood-stained hands, and now the future of justice balanced on a knife's edge. The case no longer asked only who killed Meera. It demanded something more painful, how many lives her secrets had already destroyed. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read. Aarav, hollow-eyed, gripped his wedding band like a lifeline. Acquitted of murder yet convicted of involuntary harm, he faced years behind bars. Raghav, shadowed by suspicion, walked free, his obsession unpunished. The files Meera hid, proof of power, corruption, fear, remained sealed, buried deeper than truth. Justice fractured, leaving more questions than answers. As Aarav was led away, he whispered her name, not knowing if he mourned the woman she truly was, or the illusion she left behind. In Paris, love's promise had ended in silence, betrayal and unanswered shadows.